The red plains were wide and empty, stretching from one horizon to the other like a sea made of dirt and broken stone. The wind was sharp and dry, carrying the sound of distant battle and the smell of smoke. In the middle of this wide-open land, a young warrior named Kayla was running for her life. Her feet hit the ground again and again, but each step felt slower than the last. Her lungs burned, her throat felt like sand, and her heart hammered so fast she feared it might burst. Behind her, she could hear the enemy pack. They ran without fear, like trained hunters chasing wounded prey. Their heavy boots pounded the ground, their voices rose in cruel laughter, and their armor clashed as they rushed forward. Kayla did not need to look back to know they were close. She could feel it in the air. She could feel it in her bones. She clutched her long spear in both hands. It was the last thing she had left from her clan. The golden banners, the horses, the shields, the warriors, everything else had been destroyed. She had watched it happen. She had watched her people fall one by one until only she remained. She did not run because she was afraid. She ran because someone had to survive. Someone had to remember. Her legs finally carried her to an old stone circle that stood in the center of the plain. It was made of tall, cracked rocks, placed there long before her time, maybe long before any living person. Legend said the first heroes of her people prayed there. Some believed the stones could hear the voices of warriors. Others believed the stones were silent graves. Kayla did not know which story was true. All she knew was that this was the last place she could stop. She turned around inside the circle, breathing hard, her violet eyes blazing with pain and anger. The enemy pack arrived only moments later, blocking every path of escape. There were 10 of them, all dressed in dark armor and carrying sharp weapons, swords, axes, hammers. They spread out slowly, forming a half circle around her. None of them looked tired. None of them looked uncertain. They moved like men who already believed they had won. The pack leader stepped forward. He wore heavy armor with red markings and carried a curved black sword that dripped with fresh blood. His voice was deep and cold as he spoke. "So this is the last child of Vale," he said. "Running will not change fate." Kayla did not answer. She could taste blood in her mouth. Her arms shook, her legs trembled, but she lifted her spear anyway. It was long, thin, and decorated with red cloth near the tip. It had been passed down from her grandmother, then to her mother, then to her. She had sworn she would protect it with her life. The pack leader smirked. "Look at you," he said. "Alone, tired, broken. Why keep fighting?" Kayla swallowed hard. Her voice came out rough but strong. "Because my people are not gone," she said. "Not while I breathe." The warriors laughed, a cruel and ugly sound. Then the leader gave a small nod, and 2 of them rushed forward, blades raised high. Kayla moved before she could think. She spun to the side, thrusting her spear with all her strength. The sharp tip pierced the first attacker's armor, sinking into his chest. He screamed and fell back. The second attacker swung his sword, but Kayla ducked. Feeling the wind of the blade pass over her head, she pulled her spear free and backed up toward the center of the stone circle. Her arms hurt, her ribs felt wrong, and her vision blurred for a second. But she forced herself to stay on her feet. She forced herself to breathe. The wounded warrior crawled away, pulling at his armor and choking on his own blood. The others stared at her with new anger. "She is not afraid." One of them growled. The leader lifted his sword. "No," he said. "She is foolish." Kayla adjusted her stance. She knew she could not win against all 10. She knew death was close. But somehow she felt calm. If the end had come, she would meet it with dignity. She would not cry. She would not beg. She would fight until her body gave up, and even then she would not surrender. The wind blew through the stones. Dust swirled around her feet. Her heartbeat slowed, steady and quiet. She whispered a prayer to the old heroes, if they could hear her now. Let them witness her final stand. She lifted her spear one more time and waited for the enemy to come. Kala's legs trembled as she stood in the center of the stone circle. Her hands gripped the spear tighter, feeling the familiar weight and comfort of it. The broken plain stretched around her, red dust swirling in the wind. The 10 enemies closed in like shadows, their armor shining under the harsh sun, weapons ready to tear her apart. She could hear their breathing, sharp and heavy, smell the sweat and blood on their bodies. It should have terrified her, but it didn't. Fear was a luxury she had long since discarded. Now all she had was the need to fight, to survive, to make her life mean something even in the face of death. The first enemy lunged. Kala twisted her body, swinging the spear in a wide arc. The tip cut into the man's shoulder, and he screamed, staggering back. She didn't pause. Another attacker came at her from the right, swinging a curved axe. She leaped aside, feeling the wind from the axe slice past her cheek. Her heart raced, but her mind was sharp, calculating, alive. Every movement counted. Every second could be her last. Her arms burned from holding the spear. Her back ached from dodging and striking. Her breathing came in short, ragged gasps. She felt blood running down her side, warm and sticky, but she ignored it. Pain was nothing compared to the thought of dying without a fight. She could taste dust and metal in her mouth. The sun beat down on her head, making her vision swim. Yet she did not falter. One of the warriors, larger than the rest, charged straight at her, roaring. Kala planted her spear in the dirt to block him. They collided, metal clanging against metal. He shoved her back with brute force. She stumbled but held on, her legs screaming beneath her. The spear bent slightly, a warning she could not ignore. She pushed with all her strength, throwing her weight into it, managing to drive him away. Her chest heaved, lungs burning, and sweat mixed with blood on her skin. Another attacker circled from behind. Kala spun, barely dodging the swinging mace. She jabbed with the spear, hitting his armor but not finding flesh. He growled, swinging again, harder this time. She ducked, feeling the mace's edge graze her shoulder. Pain flared, hot and sharp, and she stumbled back. Her fingers ached, muscles screamed. She looked at her spear. It was still whole, but she knew it would not last long. She fought on, moving like a storm across the circle. She dodged, stabbed, ducked, and spun. Every strike she landed was a small victory. Every block she made was a breath of hope. But the enemy was relentless. They were like a tide, pushing her back, closing every space she could use to fight. She could feel exhaustion creeping into her bones. She could feel the weight of the world pressing on her shoulders. The pack leader watched quietly, analyzing her. He did not move yet. He let the others tire her, let them waste their strength, until she was almost broken. Then he would strike. Kala sensed it. She tightened her jaw. She had to survive until that moment, and maybe, just maybe, she could turn it around. Then, in a moment that felt both slow and fast, it happened. Her spear, her last weapon, her connection to her family, her clan, her people snapped with a sharp, cruel crack. She stared at the broken wood in her hands, frozen. The tip fell to the ground with a hollow thud. Her knees gave way slightly. Dust and dirt clung to her wet hair. Her mouth went dry. For the first time in hours, she felt the weight of hopelessness. She had fought so hard. She had moved with every ounce of skill and courage she possessed. And now, the last thing she had to protect herself was gone. The pack leader stepped forward, sword glinting in the sun. He was calm, confident, and cruel. He looked at Kala with contempt and satisfaction. "End of the line," he said, voice low and cutting. "No one survives alone." Kala's hands shook. She wanted to scream, to cry, to collapse, but she forced herself to stay standing. Her breathing came in heavy, ragged gasps. She raised her broken spear as if it were still a weapon, but it offered no protection. The other warriors moved closer, their eyes hungry, weapons ready. Kella's heart raced faster than ever. She could feel the cold of death around her, circling, waiting for the right moment. Her vision blurred. Pain burned through her body. She thought of her family, of her clan, of every face she had ever loved. She thought of all the stories that would die with her, and then she waited, not because even in the darkest moments, warriors wait. They wait for the impossible. They wait for a chance. And Kayla had always been stubborn. The wind picked up. Dust swirled around her feet. She gritted her teeth. She did not know what would happen next. She only knew she was not ready to give up. The enemy circled her. They closed in, ready to end her story. Kayla stood in the middle of the red dust, broken spear in hand, shaking, bleeding, exhausted, but alive. And then, from above, the world changed. Kayla's heart hammered in her chest. The enemy warriors closed in, their shadows long on the red plains. The air felt heavy, full of the metallic smell of blood and the dry dust rising from her movements. She raised her broken spear, trembling, knowing that this might be the end. She could feel it, the cold, final certainty of death pressing down on her. Then, a sound cut through the wind. A deep, powerful roar, unlike anything she had ever heard. She froze mid-breath. The enemy froze too. Their eyes darted to the sky. Kella's pulse leaped. It was sudden and strange, almost unreal. The kind of sound that makes your chest hurt with anticipation. The sky split. A streak of fire tore across the horizon, falling fast, faster than any comet or meteor she had ever seen. It fell straight toward the plains, leaving a trail of black smoke behind it. Kayla squinted, shielding her eyes from the sun and the burning trail. Her broken spear trembled in her hands. The warriors' laughter died in their throats. What in the sovereigns? One of them whispered, stepping back. The fiery streak struck the ground with an explosion that sent a wave of dirt and stones flying in all directions. Kayla was knocked to her knees, coughing, her hair and clothes covered in dust. The blast threw her off balance, but she rolled forward instinctively, trying to protect herself. When the dust cleared, she blinked in disbelief. In the smoking crater, something moved. Slowly at first, then more confidently. Kayla held her breath, unsure of what she saw. The enemy warriors stared too, frozen in shock. A figure rose from the fire and dust. It was humanoid, but unlike anything Kayla had ever seen. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing armor that was scorched and cracked, with strange markings she didn't recognize. Blue light shone faintly from the helmet's visor as the figure straightened, dust falling from their shoulders like rain. Kella's heart skipped a beat. She had heard stories about humans. Legends whispered in the dark corners of villages about fighters from distant worlds who fell from the sky, wielding power and strength no one could understand. They were said to be unstoppable, strange, fearless. She had thought those stories were exaggerations, until now. The figure stepped forward from the crater, boots crunching over the rocks and dirt. Smoke rose behind them, and the sun reflected off the damaged armor, making them glow like a comet. The enemy warriors shifted nervously. Kella's chest ached in sudden hope, something she hadn't felt for hours. The figure removed their helmet. Blue eyes stared out from a face smeared with dirt and soot. They were alive. They were human. And they were walking straight toward the enemy. Kella's lips parted. She couldn't speak. Her lungs burned, her chest heaved, but the presence of this stranger filled her with sudden courage. The impossible had arrived. The figure's voice was calm, even playful, cutting through the tension like steel. "Mind if I enter the fight?" they asked. The pack leader barked a laugh, dark and cruel. "Human, this is none of your business. Step aside or die." The human shrugged, brushing dust from their armor. "Yeah, well, letting people die isn't really my thing." The first enemy warrior screamed and charged, clearly thinking the human would be easy prey. But the human moved with impossible speed. 1 second they were facing the attacker, the next they twisted, grabbed him, and slammed him to the ground with a sickening crack. Kayla gasped, unable to tear her eyes away. The warrior was unconscious before he even realized what had happened. The other enemies hesitated, confusion and fear flickering across their faces. They had expected an easy kill. They had not expected this. Kayla felt hope swell inside her chest. Her knees, weak from exhaustion, suddenly felt stronger. Maybe she could survive. The human glanced at her, wiping dust from their face. Blue eyes met her violet ones. A small, crooked smile appeared on their lips. It was a smile that said, "I've got this." "You're not alone." Kayla swallowed hard. The red dust swirled around her, wind whipping through her hair. She could not believe it. The moment she had prayed for, an impossible rescue had arrived from the sky. She felt a shiver run down her spine. The taste of hope, sweet and sharp. The enemy pack looked at the human with uncertainty now. Kayla tightened her broken spear in her hands. She would fight too. She would survive too. Together, maybe, they could turn the tide. The human took a step forward, confident and fearless, and Kayla realized something in her chest had changed. This was no longer a last stand. This was the beginning of something bigger. From above, the sky seemed to watch. From below, the dust and blood marked the ground like a warning. And in the middle of it all, Kayla and the human stared at the enemy, ready to defy fate itself. The Red Plains had never felt so alive. Kayla's eyes widened as the human walked toward the circle, dust falling from his scorched armor. His steps were steady, confident, and somehow calm, as if the chaos around him was nothing more than a light breeze. He glanced at her, noting the blood on her arms and the broken spear in her hands. Then he turned toward the enemy pack, who were still frozen in shock and fear. "Mind if I enter the fight?" He asked again, casual, almost joking. The pack leader's face darkened with anger. "Human," he spat, "you have no right to interfere. This does not concern you. Step aside or die." The human tilted his head slightly, as if considering the threat. Then he shrugged. "I don't really do step-asides." Before Kayla could even react, one of the smaller warriors charged at the human, sword raised high. The human moved like lightning. He sidestepped, grabbed the attacker's arm mid-swing, and spun him into the dirt. The warrior screamed as he hit the ground hard, coughing and clutching his ribs. The other enemies hesitated, fear flickering across their faces. Kayla's chest rose and fell rapidly. She had never seen anyone fight like this. The human's movements were simple, raw, and powerful. No elegant techniques, no fancy steps, just pure strength, speed, and instinct. Every strike landed with deadly precision. The pack leader growled, fury flashing in his eyes. "Impossible! How can one human?" The human did not pause. He moved forward, fists swinging, blocking attacks and striking with perfect timing. Every warrior who approached him fell to the ground, gasping or screaming. Kayla's heart raced. The impossible was happening. She could hardly believe it. She pushed herself up, gripping the broken spear. Her wounds burned, her ribs ached, but she felt a surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could survive this. She stepped forward, striking at a warrior distracted by the human. Her broken spear dug into the enemy's shoulder, forcing him back. The human glanced at her briefly, eyes bright behind his visor, and gave a small nod. Together, they began moving like a single force. Kayla's skill and the human's raw power combining. The pack roared in frustration, attacking more aggressively now. They had been confident, but the tide was turning. Every strike Kayla made found its mark. Every punch and kick the human delivered knocked enemies down like falling trees. Dust and blood mixed in the air, carried by the wind. The sun reflected off the broken armor, glinting red and gold like fire. Kayla felt alive in a way she had not for days. The fear that had gripped her heart was replaced by a fierce, burning determination. She could fight. She could survive. And now she was not alone. Someone else was here, someone who refused to let her die. The human ducked under a swinging sword and slammed the enemy into the ground, his strength terrifying to watch. Kayla's breath caught. She had never seen a warrior like this. He moved fast, hit hard, and seemed untouchable. The pack leader bared his teeth. "Enough!" he shouted. "End this now, or everything you know will burn." The human turned his gaze to the leader, calm and steady. "End it? Already halfway there," he said, almost laughing. He stepped forward, fists clenched, ready to face the leader. Kayla followed him, heart pounding. Her broken spear felt like a tiny spark next to the storm beside her. Together, they advanced. Every enemy who moved toward them fell quickly. The pack was panicking now. Confusion replaced their confidence. They screamed orders at each other, but none of them knew what to do. One by one, they were pushed back, their formation collapsing under the humans' relentless assault and Kayla's precise strikes. Kayla realized something that made her chest swell. The impossible wasn't impossible anymore. The human had arrived. He had changed everything. And for the first time in hours, she felt hope. Real hope. The sun beat down on them, the red dust swirling in the air. Kayla's wounds burned, her arms shook, but she kept moving. The human glanced at her again, this time with a small, reassuring smile. "We've got this together," it said without words. Kayla gritted her teeth, raised her broken spear, and charged forward. The Red Plains were no longer a place of hopeless death. They had become a battlefield of fire, strength, and defiance. The human walked beside her, unstoppable, untouchable, and utterly human. For the first time in her life, Kayla realized that survival was not just about skill. It was about courage. It was about hope. And sometimes it was about an ally falling from the sky, ready to fight beside you. The circle of death had become the circle of life. The impossible now within reach. The Red Plains shook with the sounds of clashing weapons, screams, and the heavy pounding of feet. Dust rose in clouds that made it hard to see, and the sun glinted off armor, turning the battlefield into a chaos of red and gold. Kayla's arms burned, her legs ached, and her chest heaved with every breath, but she refused to stop. Every fiber of her being screamed to survive, to fight, to honor the blood of her fallen clan. Beside her, the human moved like a storm. Every strike he made landed with brutal precision. He dodged, punched, kicked, and slammed enemies into the ground with terrifying power. He did not hesitate, did not falter, and did not fear. Kayla could hardly keep up with the pace, yet somehow their movements began to synchronize. When she thrust her broken spear, he stepped in to follow, creating a deadly combination of skill and raw force that the enemy could not withstand. The pack's confidence shattered. They had expected an easy kill. They had expected her to die alone. But now, one by one, their warriors fell. Screams filled the air, replaced at times by silence, as the human struck so suddenly that enemies barely had time to react. Kayla's chest rose and fell rapidly. She had survived impossible odds before, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. One of the pack warriors, larger and stronger than the others, charged at Kayla, swinging a massive axe. She raised her spear, ready to block, but before the axe could strike, the human intercepted. He grabbed the warrior mid-charge, twisted him around, and slammed him into the ground with a force that cracked stone beneath them. Kayla stumbled but caught her balance, amazed. He's incredible, she whispered to herself, eyes wide. The pack leader roared in anger, stepping forward to confront the human directly. "Enough, you will die, human." He shouted. His blade glinted under the sun as he charged, faster and more powerful than Kayla had ever seen. She lifted her spear half-heartedly to help, but she knew this fight would be his. The human didn't flinch. He met the leader's strike head-on, blocking, dodging, and striking back with fists and feet. Kayla's heart pounded in her chest as she watched them clash, metal against flesh and skill against raw instinct. The human was unstoppable. Every strike he delivered, every movement he made, seemed to drain the enemy's confidence. The pack leader was strong, but he could not anticipate the human's speed, the human's cunning, the human's unyielding will. Kayla pressed forward, striking at the remaining warriors with renewed energy. The broken spear in her hands felt alive, connected to the human's presence beside her. They fought as one. Every attack they made was precise, every movement purposeful. The remaining enemies stumbled, confusion and fear flashing in their eyes. What had seemed like a hopeless fight only moments ago was turning into victory. The wind carried the sounds of battle across the plains. Dust whipped around Kayla's face, sticking to her bloodied skin, but she did not flinch. Her legs burned, her arms shook, but adrenaline pushed her forward. Every time she thought she could not go on, she glanced at the human, at his blue eyes calm and unbroken behind the visor, and her courage renewed. She could survive. She could fight. They could win. Finally, the remaining warriors began to retreat, stumbling over the fallen, unsure of where to go. Their morale had collapsed. One by one, they fled, leaving the pack leader alone to face the human. Kayla raised her broken spear, exhausted, barely able to stand, and watched as the final confrontation unfolded. The human met the leader's charge, sidestepping and countering with a brutal strike that sent the leader staggering back. The leader's eyes widened in disbelief. "How?" he gasped, clutching at his chest. The human's fists and feet continued their relentless assault. Kayla could feel her heart racing in her throat. She had never seen power like this, never seen someone defy odds so completely. The red plain seemed to hold its breath. Then, with one final strike, the human brought the pack leader down. He collapsed to the ground, gasping, defeated, and then lay still. Silence fell over the battlefield. Dust drifted through the air like smoke, mixing with the scent of sweat and blood. Kayla leaned heavily on her spear, trembling, exhausted, and yet filled with a strange, incredible joy. They had survived. They had won. She looked at the human beside her. His armor was battered, his clothes torn, and his face streaked with dirt and blood. But he was smiling, faintly, just enough to show a spark of humor and relief. Kayla's lips curved into a weak, exhausted smile of her own. She had survived the impossible. She had not only survived, she had fought with someone who had changed her world completely. The wind swept over the red plains, carrying with it the echoes of the fallen. Kayla closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself breathe. For hours, for days, she had fought with nothing left. Now she had hope. She had strength. And beside her, a human who had fallen from the sky had shown her that even when all seemed lost, there was a way forward. Kayla opened her eyes and whispered into the wind, almost to herself, "We survived. Together." And for the first time in a long time, the red plains felt alive with possibility. The wind had begun to calm over the red plains. Dust floated lazily in the air, carrying the sharp scent of blood, sweat, and smoke. Kayla sat on the cracked stone, her hands trembling as she gripped the broken spear. Her arms ached, her ribs burned, and every inch of her body screamed for rest, but she barely noticed. The battle was over. The enemies had fled or fallen. Only silence remained, heavy and strange. Beside her, the human Ryan, as he had finally introduced himself, stood, brushing dust from his shoulders. His armor was scarred, scorched, and dented, but his blue eyes shone calm and steady. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They just stared at the empty plains, listening to the wind whisper through the stones. Kayla could hardly remember a time when silence had felt so alive. Finally, she spoke, her voice rough from shouting and exhaustion. "Are you okay?" Ryan looked at her, letting out a short, tired laugh. "I'm fine," he said, though a small cut on his cheek dripped blood. "Better than I expected." His gaze softened as he studied her. "And you?" Kayla's lips trembled. She wanted to say she was fine, but the truth pressed heavily in her chest. "Barely," she admitted. She tried to straighten, but pain shot through her ribs, forcing her back down. I almost didn't make it." Ryan crouched beside her, looking at her wounds. He didn't touch her, but his presence was steadying. "You fought well," he said. "Almost didn't need me." His words were simple, but Kayla felt their weight. For hours, she had been alone, fighting for survival, and now someone had stood beside her. Not just anyone, a human, someone from a world far beyond hers. Someone who didn't even know her but chose to fight. Kayla closed her eyes, letting a shiver run through her body. Why did you help me?" she whispered. Her voice was barely audible, carried away by the soft wind. Ryan tilted his head, thinking. He smiled faintly. "Where I come from," he said, "we don't leave people to die. If someone's fighting alone, we fight with them. Doesn't matter who they are. Doesn't matter where they're from." Kayla opened her eyes and looked at him. She wanted to argue, to say it was impossible, to say humans were myths, unpredictable, dangerous, but she couldn't. His words rang true in a way that pierced through the exhaustion and pain. She had spent years learning that survival was about strength, skill, and cunning, but not about heart. And now here was someone proving her wrong. I thought I would die alone," she admitted, her voice trembling. She lowered her gaze to the ground, ashamed of the tears threatening to fall. I thought no one would come." Ryan reached out, brushing a lock of dust-covered hair from her face. "Not today," he said softly. "You're still here. And I'm not leaving." Kayla looked at him, tears blurring her vision. She wanted to laugh, cry, scream all at once. The impossible had happened. She had survived. Not just the battle, but the overwhelming weight of hopelessness that had pressed on her heart for so long. And now, beside her, was someone who understood. Someone who had made her feel that hope was possible, even in the darkest moments. She let herself lean slightly on him, weak but trusting. The broken spear between them felt smaller now, insignificant compared to the bond forming in the middle of the ruined plains. They were alive, both of them, and that was enough. A soft breeze stirred, carrying the distant sound of returning clan scouts. Kayla could hear them shouting her name, calling out in relief. She straightened slowly, pain ripping through her body, and waved weakly. Ryan helped her up, steadying her as she took tentative steps toward the approaching voices. As the scouts drew closer, Kayla realized something profound. Her story, the story of her clan, was not ending here. She was still alive. She had survived. And she had not survived alone. The human, this strange, unexpected ally, had changed everything. Ryan walked beside her, quiet and calm, letting her move at her own pace. His presence was reassuring, steady. Kayla realized that, for the first time in years, she felt safe. Not because the battle was over, not because the enemies had fled, but because someone had stood with her. Someone had fought for her. Kayla looked at him and whispered, almost to herself, "Thank you." Ryan's smile was small, humble, but warm. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "You earned this. You fought. You survived. I just helped." For Kayla, that was enough. Enough to know that even when the world seemed lost, even when hope was gone, there could always be someone who would fight beside you. Someone who would fall from the sky and change everything. And for the first time in her life, Kayla allowed herself to feel it fully: relief, joy, and a fragile, powerful hope for what came next. The red plains stretched endlessly before them, silent now, as if holding their breath. Kayla and Ryan stood together, two survivors in a world that had tried to crush them. And in that silence, Kayla knew something she had not known before. Survival was not just about skill. It was about courage. It was about hope. And sometimes, it was about the people who chose to stand with you. Even when the world told them not to, the red plains were quiet now. The dust had begun to settle, revealing the scars of the battle. Broken weapons, scorched earth, and fallen enemies marked the ground like reminders of what had passed. Kayla and Ryan stood in the